Hello everybody, this is Joy, Shout for Joy Quilter, and this is my video for the reveal of the Doodad Mystery Quilt from fall 2023. I do not have mine finished, I'll be very honest. It happens. I do have my center block finished. It's a big one, if you notice. And I even fussy cut, and I put my label on the front. So it's kind of hidden in all of the crumb piecing, but there it is. So there you go. I have, I'm still crumb piecing is what I'm doing. I haven't finished all that I need so that I can finish the quilt. I'm close. I'm not quite there yet. I still have some background fabric because I want to use the background or use the crumb. Oh shoot! There we go. I want to use the crumb pieces as the outside edges of these blocks. And I don't have enough yet. I've got all my red finally done. It takes a while. It's not a fast process. And sad to say, my scrap bins don't look like I've taken anything out of them with all of the crumb piecing that I've done. The dark, this here, I still have a little bit left, which is good because I want to bind the quilt in the black. But that's the only one that looks like I have less than what I started with, which is sad, but it is the way it is. So, okay, I'm going to see if I can find my video here and go through that. Okay, I have my pieces. I really want to make sure that they're all about the same size. I can kind of fudge around a bit with them, especially because of that crumb piecing. The crumb piecing, that means I have bias edges going every which way, so I can ease things in quite a bit. So I kind of check my blocks, make sure they're good, that I've got about 1/4 inch. I'm going to get the dog ears taken care of at this point. Now, if I had a big variation in my blocks, then I would probably have to see what my smallest block was and see what I could do to bring everything down to that size. That would be the only thing I can imagine having to do. But I'm just going to get my dog ears off. I'm not really going to worry too much about my corners. I know that's probably terrible of me, but they were going together pretty well as I was starting to piece. So I'm not too upset with how my blocks are going together. So again, I just trim and trim, and then I can start putting things together. Yeah, more trimming. When you have a lot of blocks, you have a lot of trimming. And yes, I probably could have trimmed them up as I went, but I wasn't sure. And as I started measuring, I found out that they were all pretty much the same size, so I really didn't worry too much about it. I don't know why it took so long here. Well, I do. Because I have a camera there, I can't have my head over top of what I'm cutting, and so it's a little harder to see. So I just use the same block. Now, when I sew things together, I want to make sure that my high contrast areas match. I don't worry as much about my edges. I can fudge a little bit at the edge. So if I've got an 1/8 of an inch, up to an 1/8 of an inch shy in the seam allowance, I can hide that. So I'm going to worry most about those intersections. So what I'm doing is making sure that I pin those intersections right where they need to be. And I'm going to make sure they don't go anywhere until I've sewn them in place. And then I'll go back through and I'll pin where I have seam allowances pointing toward my presser foot so they don't flip. So some of the pins that I put in are on the back side. The seam is on the back side, and some they're on the front side. This one here, everything lined up pretty good. I didn't have to fudge at all at the outside edge. I just pin, make sure that those seams aren't going to flip, and get to stitching. There I am trying to grab my thread. It's curling. And it's not what you do in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, curling. It's the thread is curled. And I had to rethread because trying to grab it, I unthreaded my machine. So hold on to that so you don't get the thread nest underneath, and stitch along. I like to use that purple thing. In fact, the other day I sewed a hole in the purple thing. I had to cut the purple thing off my thread. So, much better than sewing through my finger, because my purple thing doesn't bleed and it sure doesn't hurt if it gets stitched on. Sometimes I'll use the tip of a pin. I'm going to go along and again use that purple thing to hold on to things. And stitch along and get that done. And then you can check to see if your seams lined up correctly. Because you really do want to have those high contrast areas meet up nicely. And take it out. I do have an automatic thread cutter. And look at that. I have some really good intersections there. I'm happy with those. So I'm going to sew the other half. And then I'm going to put these together. Now, I really want, again, I want those high contrast areas, but the important one is that very center. So I'm going to pin my center first. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a pin straight down where that point is. And you can't really see the tip of my pin, but it's right where that point is. And I'm going to match it up to the point on the other side. I want these to be stacked one on top of the other. So I'm holding that pin perpendicular to the fabric. There you go. There's your geometry word for the week, perpendicular. But I can't put it through my machine that way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my pins, put them super close to that perpendicular pin. Sometimes I grab my fork pins, but my fork pins were in a different pin cushion, which is not by my machine today. So, not even this week. So now I can take my perpendicular pin out because they're going to hold that spot on top of each other, on top of itself. And I'm going to do the same thing here. I know I didn't do it the other direction, but I could have. So pin those, and again stick those pins in really close. Sometimes you can get by with just one pin. If I really want to be careful, I'll do two. And coming together with all those crumb chunks, I'm finding I needed both pins because those crumb chunks were sometimes pushing things out of the way. I mean, it got thick in some of those corners. So this helps me match them up because those are the spots you're going to see. If I'm off where two light colored things come together or two really dark things come together, nobody's really going to notice, but that's the spot they are going to notice. So again, get those pins in there, and then I'll pin the rest of the pieces. Again, look for the crumb pieces that have the seams that you might flip. If it's the seam is pointing toward my foot, I put a pin in it. And if I have a little bit of fullness, I might put extra pins in that section. More pins help you draw up more fullness. It's kind of a magical thing. Now, there's a point where I've had pin next to pin next to pin next to pin, and yes, when I sewed it and turned it out and ironed, it looked a little full. I just quilted it a little heavy in that spot, and no one would know. Sometimes I don't quilt it as heavily, and I make sure I wash the quilt, and that helps draw some of that up. So I'm going to quilt it, and as I quilt, hopefully you can see this up here. When I come to one of those intersections, if I have that option, I see where those two seams make an X, and I might have to adjust a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right, but if I can hit that X, I'm going to get the best possible results. So if you've ever had a bad breakup, remember, hit your X. If you haven't had a bad breakup, X marks the spot that you want to cross. So again, one of those seams where the X is, and I can hit that. You don't always see them. Sometimes they're pressed to where you can't see the seam. The seams where they cross. But if you can, it's a great hint. So go along that whole seam, taking my pins out as I come to them. Sometimes, yep, there's another one of those X's. Sometimes I will sew over that leading pin, and I just go super slow so I don't hopefully jam that pin all the way into the guts of my sewing machine. Throw my timing off, make a straight pin look like a, what do you call them, a paper clip, except for one with pointy points. We don't like that. So there you go. And let's see. Pretty good there. Yep. Look at that center. Pretty happy with that. And there we go. I'm a happy camper. That means I didn't have to take it out. Now when I come to the next step, I'm going to be looking for where I placed my crumb piece on those square and a square blocks. So I'm going to match the light to the light and the dark to the dark. And again, I'm going to do that pin through the point thing as I sew them together. And you can tell I didn't get all of my blocks trimmed. Whoops. So I'll match them up like that and try to hit my X. That means in a couple of those, I might have those slim 1/4 inch seam allowances. And I'm just going to be okay with that. As long as I've got enough holding that seam together in my, enough seam allowance past my seam, I'm going to be okay with that. So again, that perpendicular pin, get those pins in right close, and do the rest of the pinning. And this one, the edges didn't quite match up. They're just off a smidge. And I'm going to tell you what's inside my seam allowance is going to stay inside my seam allowance. Nobody's going to see it. Yep. Make sure you've got your light to your light and your dark to your dark. And that crumb is opposite my pinwheel economy block. So there are times when, okay, when you get that next one on there, you're going to want to make sure, get those dog ears. You're going to want to make sure that you're matching the dark to the dark, the light to the light, and get that crumb away from your pinwheel economy blocks. Some places you're going to be sewing your pinwheel, you're going to be sewing that 8.5-inch snowball corner block with your square and a square block, and of course once you get your seam allowances in the right places, it'll make a straight line across there, or it should in the best of times. So when I told you, my edges don't quite match up, if you look, it's easier to see on this one. They aren't exact. I can hide that in my seam allowance. Nobody's going to know. What they're going to see is right here, that this matches up nicely. That's the important one. So my center block, I'm calling it the Doodad Star. I looked it up in my encyclopedia. This is the resource, and it's number 3833. It's a variation on the Green Mountain Star. I did piecing for this unit differently, and then I snowballed my corners. So I thought, hey, I can give it a new name. So the traditional name that this is based on is the Green Mountain Star. So if you want to look it up, go for it. See what I might have done differently. Or you can just follow my instructions and not snowball the corners. So let's see. I'm just going to go here. This is when I had it all laid out. And I tried to make sure that I didn't get the same exact fabric match. I mean, it's okay if it did because it's scrappy. But this was all laid out. Then I sewed it together. And again, I sewed this section here together, my hourglass, and then these half square triangles plus a square units. So I had 4 of those. I sewed my center together. I think I have it back the other way in the instructions. Sew your center and then those units, and then just sew the whole piece together. And look at how cool that looks. The crumb piecing just gives it a really, really cool look. And if you've gotten your pattern, this is the layout. I hope you enjoy that. I look forward to seeing mine finished, and I plan to finish it. I'm going to a retreat in a few weeks. That's going to be my project that I'm going to bring along with some class stuff. I want to be ahead on my classes. I've got a in-person class next year that I need to make a sample for, and I'll have my December table runner in-person class that I need to finish up. So those projects, and I'm gonna finish piecing this one here. So I hope to pop it in the group later on after I get the top pieced, and then after I get it quilted. I'm so excited. My center turned out so good. If you are someone who has trouble with your center, after it's quilted, if you want to sew a button on that spot, nobody's gonna care. It's your quilt. I want you to be happy. You could do it with all your, where'd they go? You could do it with all your pinwheel blocks too. Then it brings it all together. But again, if you do put any buttons on, sew them on after you have it quilted. I don't know about your machine, but my machine, both my long arm and my regular machine, do not like to sew over those three-dimensional things. Breaks needles, and it's a mess. So I'm not going to worry too much about that. I also want to talk about one other thing. As I was pressing some of my pinwheel economy blocks, I noticed I didn't do the greatest of job hitting some of my corners. But my thoughts on this are, when the whole quilt is together, it's going to look great. It may not be perfect. I don't plan to put this one in a quilt show. So if it's not perfect, I'm going to quilt it, I'm going to wash it, I'm going to toss it on the couch. And then nobody's going to know. My dog is not going to criticize it. My husband surely is not going to criticize it. And my guests, well, I can always fold it so the prettiest side is out. So I hope you enjoyed this mystery quilt, our 2023 Doodad Mystery Quilt. And I'd love to see your finished tops, your finished quilts, if you could share them in the group. People like to, not just me, other people seem to like them too. And I love to see all the color variations that you guys have been doing. Thank you for sharing. I will see you for sure next fall, but I'll be seeing you in my Facebook group. I hope to be a little more consistent this next year. So I'll see you later. I gotta find the right, the right one. There we go.